Havening is the transitive verb of haven, and haven means safe place. I think most of us walk around thinking we are looking for love and happiness, but we're actually not in the first instance. What we're looking for is safety. The most important relationship is the one with yourself. Three most important words in any relationship are communication, communication, communication. If you're not seen and heard and acknowledged in a relationship, that's a huge red flag.
Today's guest is Michele Paradise, a trauma-informed therapist. Michele is originally from the USA and was discovered by Zandra, Rhodes and Thierry Mugler to come to Europe and walk the catwalks of Milan, Rome, Paris and London, which she did from 1980 to 2000 in the USA and Europe. In the early 20s, Michele set up her practice in Harley Street and trained to become a clinical hypnotherapist. Over the past 20 years, she has added havening techniques and became a practitioner of HT. She moved to LA to set up her practice in Beverly Hills, where she met Dr. Deepak Chopra and became his personal development coach on his digital wellness platform, Jiyo. Welcome, Michele.
Thank you. Thank you very much for that brilliant introduction, Anita. I'm delighted to be here as always.
Thank you. It's a pleasure having you. I'm really excited for our conversation. What is one of the most courageous things that you have done?
Ooh. I'd like to think I've done more than one in my many years on this earth. But I guess the standout one, and it probably relates very much to what we're going to talk about today, is I'm going to give you the sort of 60-second version of it. I was married for 16 years and I had 2 children in that marriage. And I won't give too much away because I don't want to. There's still innocent people involved. I discovered that my husband at the time was having an affair with my best friend and my very best friend. And that affair ended, or sorry, I don't know if it ended in, but it certainly produced a child unbeknownst to me. So I then realized that my best friend and my husband had parented a child, which was quite a shock to me. And the way I found out about it, because nothing was sort of directly revealed to me. And then I found out that that wasn't the only person that he had an affair with and produced children with. So there were more. And I knew the other ones as well, but not in the same capacity. So here I was with 2 small children. I was breastfeeding one at the time, and I had to figure out what I was going to do. So I stayed. And when I found out about the second relationship and child that was born to that, I started considering getting some legal advice, which I did. I was also running films, because we run films in our mind about what our life is going to look like if, like the what if films. And I was definitely running a film of, will I have enough money to live? How will I raise 2 children on my own? I'm in a country with no support, i.e. no family to help me. And all I knew is that I had given it my best shot. And after finding out about these indiscretions, I even gave it another shot of let's get some help, let's get some counseling. He wasn't interested. So that didn't work. And then I realized that I just needed to say to myself, he doesn't get another second of my life. And that was the turning point for me. And I can't say it was easy. I can't say it was fun. But what it did, and this is where, that's why I see this as courageous. What it did is it opened up this whole container of possibility to learn more about myself and what I wanted, and to do some healing in that. So I reached out to the healing community. I started with NLP, neuro-linguistic programming, and I started having sessions for myself after meeting a makeup artist backstage and telling her my sorry tale. She gave me the card of somebody and said, here, get in touch with them. So I did that. And I was so fascinated by how well it worked that I said, I want to learn this. And I was then directed to a training with Paul McKenna and Dr. Richard Bandler, who's the co-creator of NLP. I went to the training. I think it was within 2 weeks. And I did that, and I wanted more. So I did the practitioner training. And then the following year, I did the master practitioner training. And then the following year, I did the trainer's training. So I became a trainer. And then for 10 years, I assisted Dr. Bandler and Paul McKenna as one of their assistants on their courses and learned even more. There were some days where I didn't understand what was going on, but I got up and I showed up and I kept going because I believed in the process. And as you mentioned earlier, I then started adding other methodologies like hypnotherapy, havening techniques, etc. I found a lot of compassion for myself in that. And I even found compassion for my ex-husband. People had said to me, aren't you just, how are you going to revenge him? And are you going to stop talking to him? And I said, no, because I read an expression once, which I'm sure many of you have heard. Revenge is like taking poison and expecting the other person to die. So I didn't want to live like that. And I had 2 children with him that they were going to be his father for the rest of their lives and my life. So for their sake, I decided to have a relationship with him that was amicable so that my children, who had already been through enough, realizing that they were not his only children, I didn't want to put them through any more than that. And when I reflect on that now, 20 years later, I'm really pleased that I made that decision. I didn't see it as courageous at the time, but when you ask me this question, I think it feels courageous to me now. Everything is a gift. Everything, there is an element of, there's a silver lining in everything as I see life. I see everything as a gift. And sometimes you can't see the gift part of it early on, but when you start unwrapping things and unpacking things and you really get inside of it, you realize that this was a message for you. And we mustn't ignore the messages that come into our lives because there's something we need to know. And that is really the core of my work. And I'm sorry for the hurt and the pain that was caused to so many children and others. But, I should say, it has changed my life in a very positive way. And now my goal is to inform and enlighten others and guide them on their path to healing, especially in relationships.
Yeah, that's excellent. Because that was my next question, but I think you've just answered it.
I'm sorry, I got ahead of myself, did I?
Yeah, no, that's fantastic. From being a catwalk model, what took you to trauma therapist? But you've just talked about that.
Just to say, it's funny because being a model, and I was a runway catwalk model, even if print model, you don't speak much. You just have to observe a lot of things and read people so that you know where to fit in, because that's what it's all about, being chosen in that time of my life, not anymore. So you actually study a lot of human behavior unconsciously. So it stood me in very good stead.
You're a relationship healer and has spent the last 2 decades studying human behavior. Tell me more about that.
Yeah. So as I said, I started with NLP, and NLP, if your listeners don't know this, has a lot of hypnosis in it. And I really saw the benefit of hypnosis and I wanted to learn more. So I then specifically studied hypnotherapy, which blended beautifully with the NLP, but it also strengthened it. And I just felt I just became better, hopefully, at hypnosis and hypnotherapy. It's such a beautiful healing and quick way to work with people. So then years later, Paul McKenna was talking about havening techniques. Now, Paul McKenna has many of his own techniques. And when he starts talking about a new one, you pay attention. Well, I did anyway. And I thought, I want to know more about this. So it was started by twin brothers based in New York who are still there. And I think it's over 20, 30 years now, but they didn't start training practitioners until about 2013. So I flew to New York in 2014 and I did their course, and it was absolutely life-changing, because what it is, we lovingly call it psychological first aid. So it's a way of downloading delta waves. And I'll just take my glasses off and show you. So it's like this, like butterfly strokes on the face, never pulling the skin. And then it's shoulders to elbows in a circular way. And then it's the palm of your hands, which obviously you wouldn't hold up like this, but for the sake of this, I'm showing. So these three parts of your body have been researched to and show that they release the highest levels of delta waves, and delta waves are a deep sleep healing state. But we can do it with eyes open. But even with havening, when I facilitate it, do it for someone, or they do it to themselves, it's good to have your eyes closed, and it puts you in a really deep, relaxed state. But the most important thing is havening is the transitive verb of haven, and haven means safe place. So what you're doing, Anita, is helping somebody or yourself to get in a safe place emotionally. And, so your body is down regulated from the anxiety instead of being dysregulated and, prefrontal cortex flying off. And then you can address some of the things that you really want to heal, like events that might have happened in your past, things related to PTSD, small T trauma, which would be childhood developmental trauma, or big T trauma, which is, earthquakes, fires, car accidents, things like that. So it's a very quick and easy technique to do for self and for others. And I have, when I last looked, I have the #1 self-havening video on YouTube. So if anybody wants to check it out, you just put my name in YouTube, and it's a 10-minute havening video. And I recommend that you don't do it for any really major thing, but maybe you've just had a row with somebody or somebody's upset you on a phone call. That's the perfect time to do some havening. And you can say, I choose to feel calm. I choose to feel calm. I choose to feel calm. Do you mind doing it with me for a moment and just see how you feel? Are you in a position to do some havening, or your hands busy with the controls and things? Anita? So all you do is, if you want to do your face, you don't have to do your face, but you can just do shoulders to elbows and just come back in a circular motion. Okay. And maybe your listeners or watchers are doing this as well. And when I lived in LA, the traffic is awful. It's pretty bad in London too, but people, my clients I teach them how to do it, and they'd get to say they're really stressed out in traffic, and then they get to a red light and they put their hands on their lap and do some havening and say, I am calm. I choose to feel calm. I choose to feel calm. So that helped them to move forward and not have road rage or whatever, or anxiety or stress. So it's really quick and easy technique. So I learned that, and I use that. But as much as I loved all of the methodologies and the alchemy of it, I still felt something was missing, and I didn't know what it was. I just didn't know what it was. A few years ago, I stumbled upon Dr. Gabor Mate, reading one of his books on addiction, because that comes up a lot with my clients. And that's not just substances. That can be sex, shopping, stress, porn, whatever. It's anything we can become addicted to in our lives. Food as well. I was so fascinated by his approach to addiction, which is, we need to stop asking why the addiction and start asking what is the pain, because all addiction is a set of behaviors to soothe self. And why are we soothing ourselves? What is it that we need to deal with? So he says tension requires attention, and that's what I love. So I then found out in late 2018 that he was doing a course. He started, it's called Compassionate Inquiry, to train practitioners to do his methodology. So in 2019, I started doing that, and I've been a trainee of his for the past 3 years. And he's just written a book, which I happen to have right here. It's a wonderful book called The Myth of Normal. And it's all about how stress and anxiety and the toxic culture that we live in can be the foundation of autoimmune diseases and other illnesses that we have. So
Yes,
it's a really great book
definitely.
to
Yes.
to read. And there's some healing techniques in there as well. And that's when I thought I really did find the key to the missing door. And now I just love my work. I just feel like there's so much that I can use. It's very bespoke. I don't treat any client the same. I meet them where they are, not where I want them to be. And the results for them seem to be great. So I'm going to keep doing what I'm doing.
That's excellent. So what is a trauma-informed therapist?
Yeah, it's like this fairly new title. I'm not so sure I like it, but I see the value of it. I also call myself a relationship coach, which means that, and when I say that, most important relationship is the one with yourself. It's not about others. First,
Absolutely.
we have to sort this one out, and then we can have better relationships with others. But a trauma-informed therapist is really that the person has done work around trauma, understanding trauma, what encodes trauma, and that I learned that very well through havening techniques. I learned about encoded trauma and what it looks like. I'll just pause here for a moment because it's actually a really interesting little acronym. We call it EMLI, E-M-L-I. So when a trauma is encoded, you have 4 parts to it. And the first one is certainly with event trauma, where there's an event, which is what I would do event havening for. So there's an event, and then the M is meaning. The event has meaning. So, I'll explain that in a moment. Then there's L for landscape of the brain. So are we resilient or are we vulnerable? And I is for inescapability. And the best way to illustrate this is a very quick story. I had a young man come to me, and he was up for a job promotion, but he needed to do a lot of speaking in front of groups. And he was terrified, which about 70% of the population has a phobia of public speaking, not just a fear. So he knew I worked with public speakers because I'm a public speaker, and he thought I was going to train him in public speaking. And I didn't. I started asking him questions. And what happened to him, the event that he experienced was at 5, his teacher thrust a book in his hands and said, "Here, Johnny, read." And Johnny panicked, right? So he stood in front of the class and he stuttered, and it was awful because he didn't know how to read very well at this point. And so the event was the reading in front of the class. The meaning was, to him, I'm stupid. I just feel stupid. I can't do this. The landscape of his brain at the time was very vulnerable because his parents were having issues with employment and finances and things, which really affected his life. So that's the L. And the I is inescapability. He was a kid. He couldn't move. He couldn't get a flat somewhere else. He couldn't leave the country. He was stuck. And that is the perfect storm for an encoding trauma. And that's what havening really does work with best. So just wanted to share that with you. So a trauma-informed therapist, which is really my work, in that all that I've learned really focuses on trauma, how it encodes, how we can release it, how we can work with the trauma body, because that's also something very profound, is everything that we think gets stored in the body. And if we don't find ways of letting it go, then we end up with something called a trauma body, and we find it very hard to regulate our emotions and even sometimes our blood pressure and heartbeat and things like that, and our anger.
Yes, definitely. So how can one make better relationship choices, especially after constantly picking the wrong partner?
Well, we have to go all the way back to the beginning of our time in life. And there's a very famous, well-known child psychologist called John Bowlby, a British psychologist. I think he's no longer with us, but he, in I think the 50s, 60s, he found this link between the relationships we choose in our adult life and how we attach to our parents or caregivers in our childhood. And it's called attachment style theory. I don't know if you're familiar with it, but
Yes.
there's been lots of work done on it. In fact, we've just got an attachment style quiz we've just produced. So if you
Wow.
follow me on Instagram, which I'll talk to you about later, you can all take the attachment style quiz and see where you are. But he came up with 4 attachment styles. The first one is secure attachment, which is pretty obvious. So you are securely attached as a child to your family, which means, because we have 3 basic needs: to be seen, to be heard, and to be accepted for who you are. And I know that sounds really simple, but so many of us didn't get that. And I didn't. And there's no blame to my parents, by the way, because my parents came into my life with their own unresolved traumas. And they didn't have the ability that I have had to do some healing on them. So all we want is babies, children, is to be seen, heard, and acknowledged. And in that there is love. If we don't get it, we then don't feel secure. So we don't have these secure attachments. So we might have what is called anxious or ambivalent attachment. So sometimes our parents were there for us and sometimes they weren't. So there's this ambivalence and it creates anxiety. So we grow up looking for a very similar type of relationship with other. I'll get to that in a moment. The third one is called avoidance. So maybe our parents hardly ever came into our lives in an emotional way. They can provide shelter and food and the best education, and to the outside world, it looks fantastic, but we're not emotionally connecting to them. So we're not getting our needs met, or they're not emotionally connecting to us. And usually stress is what gets in the way of that. It's not that they don't love us. It's that they need to make money, perhaps, or they need to do this and they have to be there. They have to look after a parent or one of our siblings that isn't well. You know, there's really good reasons for this. And the final one is called disorganized attachment. And that's a lot of, just very simply, that's ambivalent, anxious, as well as avoidant. But this has another layer and dimension to it, which is fear. So the child fears the parent caregiver instead of trusts them. And this was my attachment style. And I say was because the beautiful thing is we can heal from all of these and become much more securely attached. And I just want to say, again, this is no blame to my parents. It was just that my father had incredible rage with things in his life. And it was also met upon me and my brother. So we were scared of him, you know. So we had all this other stuff going on and we were scared of him. And if I had this conversation with him now, I'm sure he would have a lot of understanding about that. I don't have that opportunity, unfortunately. So we have these attachment styles that we grow up with in our lives. And what we do is we look for that because they become familiar. And if you think of the word familiar, it has the word familial in it, and familial comes from the family. So what happens is we normalize the behavior of our family. We then go out into the world with a lot of this template, really, of how we're going to meet somebody else. And this is all unconscious stuff. And I'm reading a really interesting book at the moment called Getting the Love You Want by Harville Hendricks. There's a mouthful. And he talks about this. And he says, we even go out looking for the good and the bad from both parents. So, you know, mine was specifically with my dad. But then I realized there was stuff with my mother as well. And I'm looking for that in others because what we really want to do, Anita, and this is the crux of it, is we want to repair the relationship that we didn't have. And we want it to go in the right direction. So we want it all. You know, we want to have that good relationship with our partner. But unfortunately, our partner is now given this huge responsibility to make us feel whole. And that's not their job. And that's not possible for them. So then we get upset with them and say, oh, once again, I've chosen a loser in a relationship. And instead of looking outside of ourselves, that's what we need to come in and look inside. And going back to my marriage and divorce, I chose to come back inside and sit with myself and find out what was going on with me, because why did I choose this person in the first place?
Absolutely. Yeah. So what would you say to someone that ends a relationship with, it's not you, it's me, the old cliche?
Well, it's funny you say that because I actually have developed a course called It's Not You, It's Me.
Wow.
However, so it's really great that you we're like minds here. I turn it on its head, though, because I think for most people, when somebody says, oh, Michele, it's not you, it's me, they're actually just trying to get out of it gracefully. But we know that it really hurts when they say that. But my course is all about, it isn't them, it is us, because it's about us. If we weren't seen, heard, and acknowledged, loved in the way that we needed, and then we're in relationship with somebody that, let's say we choose somebody unconsciously that is a lot like that attachment we had with our parents, we're absolutely going to be disappointed.
Yes.
So the healing work is not like, we'll say to people, you need to sort yourself out. You need to do some work on yourself. No, we need to go inside first. And so I'm sorry, I keep doing these 3s and 4s, but my course at the moment, or my process, is called the Paradise Process. And that's 4 pillars of healing, which speaks beautifully to what we're talking about. So the first thing we need to do is to create awareness, which so many of us don't do. You can't change what you don't acknowledge, right? So awareness of patterns, awareness of behaviors. Like, I'm a recovering people pleaser. I used to be a really profound people pleaser. And then I realized that wasn't working very well. So this is one of my patterns. I have a lot of awareness around my people pleasing. And I now notice it when I start to go into it, and I'm able to pull myself back. The second pillar is acceptance. So instead of getting angry with ourselves, going, oh God, you've done it again, you've chosen or you've said that again, or you felt that again. It's acceptance of self now, in this moment, which means we can change. I'm so hopeful, and I see it all the time with my clients, because we have something called neuroplasticity, which is the ability to change the way we're thinking. When we begin to accept that this is how I am in this moment, and then be able to reflect on the fact that we've been like this probably most of our lives, because that's what we learned, we live to what we learn. And that was modeled for us by our parents, again, unconsciously. They don't get up in the morning and go, I'm going to ruin my child's day. No, they get up in the morning and go, I'm going to get through this day, and hopefully everything's going to be okay. So we need to have awareness and acceptance. And then what that does is it brings us into the present. And that's the third pillar, which is consciousness, because I'm sure you've heard this statistic. Sorry, I can't even say the word myself, that we spend 90 to 95% of our day in an unconscious state. We just do the same thing over and over and over again, what we've learned. It's really difficult for us to break these habits. And then the final pillar is choice. So then we have a choice. And we can make the same choice again, but we'll have more knowledge and information. Or we can make better choices for ourselves. And that leads to better choices of partners.
That's excellent. Yeah, really like that.
Statistics. I got to practice that word.
What are red flags and cues to avoid a failure of the relationship? And it's kind of a hard question, but...
Well, I've given it a lot of thought over the years, so it's not too difficult. There are many, but I'm going to pull out some of the big ones. As our needs are to be seen and heard and acknowledged, if you're not seen and heard and acknowledged in a relationship, that's a huge red flag. If you are not acknowledged for who you authentically are, because this is all about authenticity. We're born authentic. Lots of things happen in our lives that move us away from that. We get dissociated with ourselves. And that's when we do choose inappropriate partners for ourselves that don't see us, don't hear us, and don't acknowledge us. So that's a big red flag. So if you can, if you can sit and be with self and ask self, am I seen? Am I heard? Am I acknowledged? This is an interesting one that a lot of people don't think about. I think most of us walk around thinking we are looking for love and happiness, but we're actually not in the first instance. What we're looking for is safety. Everything is about safety. Think about your life, the food you eat, the roads you cross, the cars you drive, everything we do, we have a need to feel safe first.
Yes.
And in that safety, love and happiness and everything else can grow. But if we don't feel safe with that partner, And safety can come in all shapes and sizes. That can be, we don't feel emotionally safe. We don't feel physically safe. We don't feel intellectually safe. Maybe they make fun of us and our knowledge and understanding of things. They don't see us in the way that we want to be seen. They insult us, lots of eye rolling. These are some of the bigger cues in life, in partnerships. And perhaps we're giving, and we're not receiving because we have no boundaries. Because that's another one with people pleasers. They have no boundaries. So
Yes.
they've not learned to protect self and put boundaries in place. And this terrifies a lot of people. So they just say, I'll do anything you want. Because and the subtext of that, the unspoken part is because I need to be loved and I'll take it however I can take it. But actually, people pleasing, I've now learned, is a form of manipulation, if you think about it. It's manipulating the outside world to like you. And then you'll do anything to get that. And when I first learned that, I was a little bit annoyed with that for myself. And then I thought, no, that's true, because you don't do it consciously. You do it unconsciously. You go, oh, well, they need that. So I'll be there for them and I'll help them move their house, or I'll look after their children, or I'll hold their hand while they're going through a terrible part of their life, so things like that. And then we forget about ourselves because we don't have the boundaries. We just meld into their lives. And that's really dangerous. Mind reading in relationship is very dangerous. And people, they're always surprised when I say mind reading. What's that? Well, I don't have a degree in mind reading, and I don't think there's a course on it, but there's a lot of people walking around thinking that they can mind read their partner and they know what they're thinking. And the other side of it is that they should mind read you and know exactly what you're thinking. So what happens is in relationships, the communication, if it was good at all, gets worse and it almost disappears. And then you'll hear people say, yeah, but you've been with me for 10 years. You know how I think. You should just know that. I don't agree with that, because we are being bombarded with millions of pieces of information every moment of our lives. And we change. I'm not the person I was 5 years ago, 10 years ago, 20 years ago. So why should my partner just figure out what I want and what I need? And I have a theory. This is something I say: the longer you've been together with a person, the more you need to communicate with them, not less, so that you don't fall into that trap of being of mind reading and being mind read. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. I love that. Yes.
Yeah, because a lot of people don't think that they're mind reading, but they are. They're like, well, he knows me. He should just know that I don't want to go to that party, or she knows I don't like that color, or whatever. But maybe things have changed, because people change all the time. So we really want to feel safe in a relationship. It's super important that you feel safe. It's super important that you are seen and heard and acknowledged. And the best gift you can give to your partner is to listen, to really listen in the present moment, not formulating your ideas and thinking, what's the next thing I'm going to say?
Yes,
so
definitely.
I've I don't know if you're familiar with a book by Dr. Marshall Rosenberg. It's called Nonviolent Communication. And it's a beautiful way of communicating. It's so compassionate. So what I did, it's quite a lot. And I distilled it into an acronym, a concept that I've come up with called SEND, SEND. And these are all, you can follow these things when you follow me on Instagram, if you wish, which is, well, I'll tell you at the end.
Yes.
And I have PDFs on this where I do have PDFs on boundary setting and communication. But what SEND stands for is situation, emotion, need, and desire. So if you're in a situation with a partner or anybody, I suggest you don't do it in the heat of the moment. Get into a neutral situation with them and then refer to it. And you say things like, the other day when we were talking about XYZ, I felt. Now, you notice in there that you never say to the other person, like, when you said that, you made me feel. Because as soon as you say that, they're going to get defensive. They're going to put the gloves on. Because first of all, no one can make you feel anything you don't feel already.
Yes.
So that's not true. But when we say you made me feel, they feel like they're being accused of something. So then they're going to be thinking, what can I say next to this person, right? So we want to always come from I. When you said that the other day, I felt. And these are the two things we never do or rarely do in communication, is tell people how we feel and tell people what we need. So in that situation the other day, when you said that, I felt sad. I'm going to do a very simple one here. I felt sad. And in my relationship with you, I really need to feel, balanced. I really need to feel seen by you. I really need to feel heard by you. So everything is about the person that has the sadness or the unhappiness. No blame to the other person. And then this is where you set the boundary. That's the D bit, the desire. So going forward, going forward in the future, if you're feeling really irritated with me, could you say that to me a bit sooner and not hold it in,
Yes.
And to me, this is the beautiful part of it. You then turn it around to the other person, not on the other person, but you turn it around and you invite the other person. You say, so how do you feel about this? What do you need in this situation? How would you like to move forward? And that gives you the most incredible results, because you're saying what you feel and need. They're listening, hopefully. And then you're inviting them to share as well. Now, don't be surprised if they can't do it, because a lot of people do not know how to tap into their emotions easily. Sure. They need a lot of time. But, then say, it's okay. We can come back to this. I just want to honor what your emotions and needs are and what you'd like to do. Did that make sense? The way I explained it?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah, that's really great. Because a lot of people don't express their own emotions. No. And I know even with some of my friends, they said, well, you should know what I think. I said, I would never like to know what goes on inside that head of yours. And that
I wouldn't wish it on anybody, for me.
Yeah, exactly. How does one know that they're in a toxic relationship? Because currently there's so many terms these days.
Well, there are some signs. I mean, if there's one, I just did a little video on this. It's called breadcrumbing. I don't know if you've heard this.
What's that?
Yeah, yes. Breadcrumbing it's basically, think of the concept of breadcrumbs, that you just drop a few here and, and then there's a trail. So it's the same thing with friends. It happens a lot with friends and lovers. Or it, and I'll mention this because it's, a lot happens online now. People are meeting people online and they get breadcrumbed. They get ghosted as well, but they get breadcrumbed, which means that the person gives them just enough attention to keep them on board, but not enough to commit to anything. So they might, I'll give you an example, let's say you meet somebody online and it seems all great. And then you start exchanging messages and they begin to taper off. So instead of them answering you in an hour or a day or a week, everything is taking longer. And then they circle back and you don't any longer feel like you're that important in their life. And for a person that has like a people-pleasing personality, that will really activate them and they'll try harder and work harder. And that will create some desperation, perhaps, or getting in touch with them and bombarding them with lots of messages on WhatsApp or voice messages or whatever. And that's really bad for the person that is the people pleaser in this situation, because they are getting so dysregulated by the anxiety that they're feeling, because they don't feel seen, heard, and acknowledged. So that's one example of what it can look like. Obviously, if somebody's ghosting you, that's a big message. You don't want to go back there. But do you mean like in an existing relationship that, okay, well, control is one of the most toxic aspects of any relationship. And I'm so happy to say that coercive control is now, well, I'm not happy to say it, but I'm delighted that it's been recognized. Coercive control is now a crime. And you can get police involved with that and people can be prosecuted, which is a fairly recent thing. But control is one of the most toxic aspects of a relationship, and it can be very insidious and very covert, and you don't even know it's happening.
Mm.
So whoever's listening to this, please take a moment and reflect. I'm not asking you to look for problems, but reflect on if you're noticing more control in your relationship, i.e., are you being controlled? Are you being emotionally controlled? There may be a lot of gaslighting going on. You may be physically controlled. You may be being told by your partner that, no, you can't go out. You can't see that friend. Get off the phone. You spend too much time doing this. Maybe they're controlling your finances. Maybe they're controlling your relationship with your family. And as I say, this happens very gradually.
Mm.
But when it happens, you then begin to realize when you stop and reflect that your life is just so small, you know, and people that are coercively controlling are usually very good at it. So they're not going to give you a heads up about it. You know, they're going to be very clever about how they're controlling you. So that's a big one. And, you know, if there's any physical, emotional, mental abuse in the relationship, run. Do not walk away from that relationship. Just because you may have experienced it as a child, maybe in your family, corporal punishment was a thing, and you thought to yourself, I hear that people say this all the time, well, it's not great, but I'm still alive. I survived it. How many times have we heard that? So
Yes.
They don't think it's a problem when somebody else does it to them or they do it to somebody else. So really look out for that in relationship, you know, really be present with that. And am I accepting abuse, emotional abuse, physical abuse, mental abuse from somebody? And have I normalized this? It's not, there's nothing normal about it, even though I hate that word normal, but there's nothing normal about abuse. But we tend to accept, because we've got so used to dysfunctional relationships in our family, that we accept them, we normalize them, they become familiar. And then what we do, just to finish that thought from earlier with attachment, is we actually have a radar for the suffering. We actually need the suffering in the relationship for it to feel familiar until we begin to wake up to these things and start doing the healing work. I hope that
really
closed the loop on that one that I said earlier.
Yes. So what have you found is your biggest learning around relationships?
Well, I learned with Dr. Mate and another doctor that I follow his work, and I'm a trainee of his, Dr. Richard Schwartz, which is called Parts. It's a protective parts. It's called Internal Family Systems. And that work I've been inviting into my life, working with others for me. And what it really comes down to is accessing those parts of self that are wounded from childhood. And we all have them. We all have them. And being with those, being present with those. So seeing them, hearing them, and acknowledging them. And what you're doing, if you haven't figured it out already, is you're reparenting parts of those selves, because we cannot change the past. And I'm sorry about that for everybody that has had a difficult past, but we can certainly change the future for ourselves.
Definitely.
So it's about how we respond to these parts. And it goes back to my 4 steps. So we become aware of them. We accept them. We're now conscious about them. We have tools like havening and sitting with ourself and acknowledging parts of ourself. And then we make better choices. And healing is moving in the direction of wholeness. Healing isn't an off-on switch. It's not like I'm here one day and next week, next month, next year, I'm going to be here and all this is going to be gone. I won't think about it. No, that's not how it works. Because wounding, if you think about wounding, and wound is, trauma is the Greek word for wound. So you see how they work together. But wounding always leaves a scar, doesn't it? There's a hard skin. It's kind of inflexible. It heals over, but it's never the same as the rest of the skin around it. So it reminds us that there's something we need to remember that we've learned. And so scars can be a gift as well. They're not all bad.
I love that.
Good.
Yes. What would you say are the foundations of a healthy relationship, if you can?
Yeah, I'm good. I seem like I keep saying the same thing over because this is sort of my mantra. It is that you see and hear and acknowledge the other person. And you know what really helps to build the most beautiful relationship is to create a compassionate space for each other to share their childhood experiences. Now, I'm not saying sitting there and having a whining conversation all the time about my parents did this and I had this, but no, just helping each other to connect with, in a compassionate way, what you lived as a child, the good, the bad, the ugly. And what happens to us is when we can connect to those parts of ourselves, we begin to release a lot of things and we begin to heal. And then when we allow ourselves to be in that space with each other, we hold a compassionate space for them, and they begin to see themselves as their younger self, because all of this stuff usually took place between 0 and 7. And Dr. Bessel van der Kolk says all childhood trauma is pre-verbal. So he thinks it's even younger than that, when we couldn't communicate our needs. And there's a lot of value in that belief. So by holding a compassionate space for the other person to share with you, not in, as I say, not in a whining way or a, oh, my life was terrible way. I've experienced this in my childhood. And what did you experience in your childhood? And I've done this with my partners, and it's been wonderful because I understand them so much better. I have so much compassion for their childhood, and I understand why they might have this relationship with money or food or emotions. And that helps us to really build on that, and for me to have a lot of forgiveness and understanding for that person.
Can understand that, yes. So when is it time to end a relationship that just isn't working?
That's a hard one. It's like, how long is a piece of string? But what I would say, I'll use myself as an example. As I said earlier, I really did invite into our relationship some therapy, marital guidance and all of that stuff. And if the other person isn't willing or able to do it, and you're doing the work on yourself, and you're realizing that you're growing and they're not growing, or they're not willing to sort of draw a line under this and to start a healing journey together, so that you can move away from the toxic relationship that you've had and find out about self first, and then come into relationship with each other more. See, I really take umbrage to the expression "my other half." I hope I don't offend anybody when they say, but when people say "my other half," "my better half," I'm not half a person when I come into relationship.
Absolutely.
I'm as whole as I can be in that moment. Okay. And I'm not looking for somebody else to complete me, because that is not their job.
No, absolutely.
And that is not their responsibility. And I want to be in relationship with somebody who comes in as whole as they can be, so that together we create this entity that was never there before, and we can grow and create something as beautiful as possible for both of us that feels safe. But if we're looking for somebody to complete us and to make us happy, that's never going to work.
Yeah, because I actually often say I'm quite independent. I can get on with my life, and I want someone to complement my life.
Yeah,
for it to
absolutely.
complement it, not to complete me, because there's nothing to complete. You want to enhance it for sure.
It's just, you've just made me think about this book I mentioned earlier, and Dr. Mate. When people do the dedication in the front of the book, if I may, this is actually my answer to his wife, whose name is Ray, to dearest Ray, my life partner, who saw me before I could see myself, and who loved all of me long before I could love myself at all. I just think that really sums it up. It's goes back to being seen, being heard, and being acknowledged. And if our partner cannot do that for us, and we cannot do that for them, then we really must go.
Yeah.
Or together we do some work individually and collectively on ourselves and on our relationship. But I'm all about keeping people together. I'm not about blowing up relationships, but we both need to do the work in the relationship for sure.
Definitely. Yes. What resources do you recommend, daily tips, tools, to anyone that wants to get out of a relationship that they know is no good for them, even damaging,
Yeah.
but they feel they love their partner. They can't not be with them. It's a tough one.
It is a tough one, but I'm going to answer it maybe not in the way that you were hoping. I'm sorry. I'm not going to give you tools and tips and techniques because I think there's another issue here. I would really ask that person, what does love mean to them?
Absolutely.
Because going back to some of the things I said earlier, love can be very dysfunctional. Because if that's the love that we've been shown, and we've got used to that, then we accept all these hurtful, negative things from someone. That's a very dysfunctional love. And that isn't what I would consider to be love. Not that I get the right to judge what love is for anybody else, but I would really ask them some very compassionate inquiry questions around that. Like, you know, what I find out a little bit more about their childhood and what they accept as love and what they learned that love was. Because I think people bandy this word about way too much. And they say, oh, I love you. And they think they're the three most important words in any relationship. But for me, the three most important words in any relationship are communication, communication, communication. That's
Absolutely.
That's it. And if you don't have communication with your partner, love will not grow. Healthy love will not grow. So the tool and technique I will tell you is to really think about the word love. Love, by the way, is a verb. It's not a noun. It can be a noun too, but it's more of a verb. So we need to live love. We need to express our love physically, not just say the word. It's showing up every day for that person in a place of love, coming from a place of love. I would have I would certainly reach out to somebody, a good friend or a professional that could help me, you know, work through the love part of it and how I can accept that I love this person on the one hand and they're bad for me on the other hand. There's a big disconnect. And that goes back to Dr. Richard Schwartz's work, which is when we say things like, well, there's a part of me that feels this way, and then there's another part of me that feels that way. That's when you want to begin to get in touch with those parts. And what do those parts need? Because they have need. And that will give us a lot of answers to that question.
I love it. Absolutely love it. Yes. So where can the listeners find you online, your books, and what's your website?
Okay. The easiest way to find me is on Instagram. It's Michele Paradise Official. However, my mother spelled my name with one L and two E's. So it's Michele Paradise Official. And I have in my bio, I have, you can get to my website, which is called Change Your Mind for Good. So you can find that. It's all words, no numbers or anything. ChangeYourMindForGood.com. And you can take my attachment style quiz and learn more about attachment style that I've talked about today. And you can learn more about the Paradise Process, which is a course that I'm selling at the moment. It's an evergreen course. So you do it at your own pace and you can take as long as you want to do it or as short as time as you want to do it. But it's we did it as a hybrid course in June of this year. So I did lives as well as people doing modules, video modules. And yeah, it sold out in a week and we got great feedback and results from it. So all of those are in my bio on my Instagram. So I think that's the best place to go to find out more about me.
Definitely. And I can put all the links in the show notes so everybody can click directly and go straight
Thank you very much. And my YouTube channel, I've got loads of videos. I love videoing. I do a lot of vlogging and I have that self-havening video on there amongst others. So just sit in the room with me. I'm there. I'll take you through the whole thing, 10 minutes. We all have 10 minutes, I hope, to look after ourselves, lots of self-care. And then once you learn it, you can do it for yourself. I have clients that tell me they watch it regularly because they feel like they're in a session with me. If something comes up, they can just go through it very quickly. So please feel free to do that as well.
That's brilliant. And thank you for sharing that.
Good.
And thank you for sharing your inspirational and courageous journey, as well as your insightful knowledge and wisdom with us today. And by doing so, I know you've helped so many others. Michele Paradise.
Thank you. Thank you so much for inviting me on this journey with you today. And I love the idea of helping anybody. And I hope this has landed with some people. And if you want to know more, just send me a DM and I'm happy to answer your questions.
That's fantastic. So my last question to you is, what is your definition of courage? Because we are Create the Courage to be Fearless podcast.
Mm-hmm.
So what is your definition of courage?
I would say that the most courageous thing that I've ever done and that anybody can do is to go inside and be with self. And now that may sound very simple, but if any of you can see me holding my hand up, so this is, let's say this is us and we're in a lot of pain. What most of us do is we look at that pain or we feel that pain and we distract ourselves from it. And our environment has the most incredible distractions like phones and tablets and any television, making a meal, having sex, whatever. We can easily distract ourselves from it, much more than when I was younger. So that's what most of us do. We distract ourselves from it. The second thing, not necessarily in this order, is we show up and we get angry with it. Oh, that part of you again. Why do you keep picking losers? Why do you keep doing this? Why do you keep saying those things and making people whatever? Mm-hmm. The only way to heal ourselves is to get into communication with it, to sit with ourselves. And that is really hard, Anita, and I'm not going to say it is easy. But once you start taking that first step, you start building a new neural pathway in your mind, neuroplasticity, and it's easier every single time. And if you add havening to that and you get yourself in a safe place first, and you then sit with that part of yourself and go, ask yourself a couple questions. Say, self, what do you need right now? Or what message do you have for me? And if it doesn't come up, it doesn't come up. Just stay with it, hold a space, and always show up for that part and say, I see you, I hear you, I acknowledge you. That's courageous. That is really courageous. And that can change your life.